Hello, welcome to the first video about The Great Gatsby. This video is going to focus on chapter one. Before we get into the analysis for this series of videos, I'm not going to focus specifically on one or two or three different motifs. There's truthfully so much going on in this novel that I don't want to limit these lectures or your analysis or your ability to do analysis. I don't want to limit them based on what I want to focus on. So I'm going to go through the chapter and I'm just going to point out all the things that I have noticed in my most recent reading and in previous readings as well. And then from there, you can take, one or the sum of these or whatever, and just kind of develop your own interpretation. Which one do you want to focus on when identifying a theme in the novel? Um, so that's my thinking as I go through these. It'll be a little less organized as previous videos because, like I said, there's so much going on. It would be irresponsible of me to only focus on a couple and leave out, the possibility of other motifs that you might find more interesting, or you have a teacher who wants to focus on those instead. Um, that being said, there are a couple things that I'm probably going to end up highlighting more than others. Color is going to be one of them. The color imagery in this novel is essential to understanding and interpreting the novel. So anytime you encounter and we encounter a color in this text, it's important to think about, okay, why specifically that color, right? And that's where we think of three levels of meaning. We think denotative meaning of a word or a color, the connotation, and then the figurative meaning. The denotative, of course, meaning the definition of the color. And we all know, what green is. We all know, unless we're colorblind, but, let's not get into semantics, right? We all understand what, a color is defined as. When we get into connotation is when it gets interesting. And connotation is words or phrases or thoughts that we associate with a word, or in this case, a color, but aren't part of the definition, right? So if we're thinking about the color red, right, a couple things that instantly pop into our head are blood, color of stop signs. You might think violence, you might think strong emotions, right? And any of those could potentially be valid, right? Because they are just connotations, or just things that we just naturally associate with a word because of, our collective conscious as a society. And then taking those connotations, you insert them into their use in the text and try to figure out which one is the most accurate or most valid figurative meaning, right? And we'll get to that when we get to that. I'm also going to focus a lot on hope because this is ultimately a novel about hope. But I'm not going to focus specifically on that. All right. So, chapter one is our introduction to a bunch of our most important characters, right? We meet our narrator, Nick Carraway, right? And he gives us some background on him and then his first foray into life living in the East, where we meet Tom and Daisy Buchanan. We also meet Jordan. And at the very end of chapter one, we get a glimpse of Jay Gatsby himself, right? And we'll kind of go through all of those as we go. In the beginning, Carraway, as he's going through his background as a person, says reserving judgment is a matter of infinite hope. And I wonder if this isn't kind of naive. So let's break this down. Reserving judgment, so not judging people, or at least not applying some sort of judgment to a person or a situation, is a matter of infinite hope. So what he's saying is that he is somebody who doesn't judge people because he wants to believe that there is good or um, that there is good in everyone, which is wonderful, right? It's a Christian principle, it's a moral principle, right? Don't judge people lest you want to be judged type of thing. But the question is there some naivety attached to that, right? We know if we go through life just hoping and believing in the best in everybody, I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer, but you're gonna get screwed over by somebody. There's gonna be somebody who is not trying to use their best intentions and not using, you know, not looking out for others except for themselves. So, there's a difference between judging somebody and treating somebody with that judgment in mind. We can still be kind and treat people with kindness, but we can know that maybe they are not trustworthy or they are not somebody that we have to avoid, right? So, by saying that, well, reserving judgment is a matter of infinite hope, you trying to tell me that if I don't trust somebody who has proven themselves not to be trustworthy, that I am not hopeful? That just seems naive, right? And that's going to be a big thing in this is Nick's naivety throughout this entire novel is astounding. He doesn't see how he is being used by every single one of these characters, right? And then at the end, he's the one who's all mopey, like, "Oh well, I guess I just blah 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 blah," right? Um, Later on, he says about Gatsby, it was an extraordinary gift of hope, a romantic readiness such as I had never found in any other person. So just to highlight that idea of hope again, I don't have anything to say about that because we haven't read the novel yet, but that's going to be an important concept later on. Another important concept in this novel is the idea of the West or the Midwest versus the East. Watching here, so the East. Um, why is that an important concept? It's an important concept because there's a cynicism and there's a way of life associated with different regions of the country. It's the same thing we have with words and phrases, right? There are connotations, there are things we associate with different regions of the country and different countries around the world um, that may, for whatever reason, may or may not be true. So Nick Carraway grew up in the Midwest, right? He talks about that, you know, talks about his background, how his great uncle, opened a hardware store during the Civil War, and his family was pretty well off, and he has these values. But when we think connotatively of the East Coast, we think like that New York, that Boston lifestyle, right? We think fast talking, fast living, you know, forgive my language, screw a guy out of a buck, type of living, which is not connotatively something we associate with the Midwest. The Midwest, we associate values. We think of it as the heartland, right? Farmers, and good old fashioned folks type of thing. And so, there's a naivety to the Midwest that there is not the cynicism of the East Coast. And again, this is going to be a contrast that shows up throughout the novel. Nick, representing the Midwest, is naive. He doesn't necessarily see what is happening. He goes to this cynical, fast lifestyle on the East Coast. He's completely absorbed. He's seduced by it. He's chewed up and he's spit out. Although he does say so Caraway served in World War One. He comes back and he's disillusioned by life in the Midwest after World War One. So he gets this worldly experience. He goes out and serves in the Great War, comes back and sees that life is small. right? But the problem is that he as a person hasn't developed outside of um, that containment. So even though he has had this experience, military life still has contained him to this naive way that he is. And so it doesn't translate when he steps out. He's just able to deal with it better than perhaps some people who would go through this. So he decides to move east. And here's the first instance where, excuse me, where his naivety kind of shines is that he he's lived in the East for a couple days, and another traveler asks him for directions, and he's able to say, "Oh, you go here, here, and here," right? So he automatically assumes that, okay, I live here now. I am one of these people. And that's just not true, right? Just moving somewhere and knowing where locations are doesn't make you a member of that group, right? There's an exclusivity, right? If you've driven around, you see those bumper stickers where, keep Portland weird or keep Memphis weird, keep Nashville weird. Uh, every state has a rival state where they don't like the people. So, I'm in Oregon, so we don't like Californians and we think Washington has terrible drivers. When I grew up in Wisconsin, we detested people from Illinois and thought people from Minnesota were hicks, right? I'm sure this is true in every state. You have that other state that you don't like. And so when I moved out here, it wasn't 3 days later I knew how to get to the grocery store. So now I'm an Oregonian. No, there's a whole lifestyle that you have to, kind of adapt to and become a part of before you are a member of that clique. So this is an important thing throughout the novel. Um, so meeting with the Buchanan. Over color, first of all. I just wrote some of the colors. There are more in the chapter. Um, but he talks about the Buchanan's house being, or the houses in the East being white palaces. Talks about the Buchanans living in a red and white mansion. The windows glowing with reflected gold. A rosy colored space in one of the rooms in the Buchanan's house. They have a wine colored, so a red colored rug, right? Um, to about a car having a rear wheel painted black, and it must be, I'm guessing, Jordan's gray sun-strained eyes. Maybe it's, matters. Um, Red gas pumps, and then finally at the end, the single green light, which we'll talk about later. So if we notice, when we're talking about the Buchanans, red and white are the dominant colors. Why those? Let's take them one at a time. Color white we associate with purity, we associate with goodness, we associate with holiness, right? But mostly purity. Now, contrast that with red, which, as I said before, we typically associate with violence or blood or stopping, right? Some sort of sudden emotional reaction. So here you have two colors that contrast wildly with each other in terms of their connotations. You have purity and you have deep emotion and violence. These are two colors that should not be together at all because it creates a contrast that is stark and truthfully, it creates a conundrum, right? But here you have them together. And when you think about it, you think of this white palatial mansion that they live in. And if it has red trim around it, it gives it this picture of this purity dripping in blood or spattered in blood. When they go in, right, rooms are, what did I say, rosy colored, or the rug is wine colored, and wine color would be a deeper red than we associate with red, right? So if we think about the blood that is a painting, forgive the term, painting, the purity of this scene, it reflects the Buchanans, right? Here we have, let's start with Tom. Tom is described as like a Superman, right? He's like a Marvel superhero. He looks great, he's strong, he's confident, right? He has tremendous wealth. He is the ideal man. He would be the Ubermensch. Like I said, he's the Superman. But then he opens his mouth and starts talking, and it's like, wow, this is what it'd be like if Superman was racist. And that's the same contrast of red and white. You look at this white and you're like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And then you get this red, right? And it's just this different emotion and it doesn't fit. And that's Tom. And we'll see this with the Daisy as well. We don't get a lot of it in this chapter. We're not going to see it till later. But, when Nick first sees Daisy and Jordan, they're described as being in white as well, right? They look like Greek statues, so marble, that idea of perfection. But as we'll see later on, both of them are deeply flawed as well. So that first impression, ends up being the white part, and then we see the red later on. Um, It's interesting to note that descriptions of Tom and Daisy in this first chapter, Tom is almost exclusively described in his appearance, whereas Daisy is described almost exclusively in sound and voice, right? So Tom, we get, he looked like this and he stood like this and he went, he moved like this. Whereas Daisy, it's all about the voice, all about her voice and how she draws you in with a whisper to make you feel like you're the only important thing in the room, right? Or that she has this affectation, right? So that's an interesting contrast between the two of them. Um, yeah, Tom is racist Superman. I have written at the bottom of that page. The red in Daisy's white shows a little bit in this chapter in that Tom gets the phone call, and we don't know who it's from, but we have to assume, or Jordan tells us that he has a girl in New York, or he has a girl on the side, right? So this phone call is from that other woman. Daisy comes back and she covers for Tom, right? She lies in order to not not show the red underneath the white, right? Although, if you go back and you think about the rosy colored space on the inside, right, that's red trying to break out of that white. Rose would be a mixture of red and white. So, her trying to paint over in white, the red that is Tom Buchanan, is her lying to Nick and to whoever else she can lie to. Going back to the idea of East versus Midwest, right? I said that there was a seductive quality about the East, right? We show up and we get the picture of the Buchanan estate. We get the picture of Tom. We get the picture of Daisy, right? And it's all very seductive. You know, I don't know anybody personally who wouldn't love to be wealthy, right? Wouldn't love to be incredibly handsome or beautiful, right? That's something that, although we may say, oh, it's not important, it's something we all desire. We all desire, to be extreme, to be attractive to others. We don't want to have to worry about our finances and things like that. So there's a seductive quality to the life in the East. Um, to somebody from the Midwest who maybe, you go back, Caraway came from a pretty well off family, but Mideast or Midwest well off is nothing like East Coast well off, right? Chicago rich is not the same as New York rich. New York rich is a totally different thing. So Caraway gets seduced to this Eastern lifestyle in a couple of ways. And one of the most interesting ones is the spell that both of these women, Daisy and Jordan, cast on him, right? When Daisy talks to him, He is instantly she's like a siren, right? So if you think back to the Odyssey, she's like a siren. Caraway's almost got to put wax over his ears so that he's not, seduced by her voice. And there's a point where he snaps out of it on, in my book, page 22, and she instantly goes back to it. She goes back to the whisper to re-grasp him, to keep him there, right? And it's the same with Jordan. Jordan's background is very mysterious and it casts a spell on Nick. So this seductive quality is done in different ways with different characters. With Tom, it's his wealth and his forcefulness. With Daisy, it's her voice. With Jordan, it's her mystique, right? And so all of these three characters have this seductive quality, and Gatsby will have one too when we get to him, right? That draws Haraway into this world and will ultimately, break him apart. Let's go to the last image where Caraway gets back to the little bungalow that he is renting. And he gets there and he sees his neighbor, Jay Gatsby, standing out looking across the sound. And it's this image of him looking across the sound towards this green light off in the distance. And he has his arms extended toward it, right? So just think about this image for a minute, right? And it's pretty clear. We don't know what that green light is yet. We're not going to know for a while. We're not going to know at least the denotative definition of that, which, so we can't apply a connotation to it yet to get to the figurative. But whatever it is, he wants it and he wants it desperately. If he's out there by himself with his arms out toward it, right? Like you're reaching for, I don't know, a piece of birthday cake that your mom made for you, or that's how I would hold up my hands to get my kids to run and give me a hug or something like that. So this final image and our first image of Gatsby, it's the first time we as the audience through Caraway's eyes get to see Gatsby, and this is the image, right? So keep that image in mind throughout the novel because it's the driving force behind Gatsby. It is everything that Gatsby stands for, is that image of him with his arms out towards the green light. Okay? So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2 will be out soon. Have a good day. Thanks for watching my videos. I hope they're helpful. If there are any other novels or anything you want me to, break apart and try to do stuff on, put a comment or email me and I will do my best to help everybody out. Thanks, guys. Bye.